Me and my brother went to go see the new Guardians of the Galaxy movie, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and I gotta say, it is absolutely amazing. Like, from beginning to end, it's just such a good movie. Like, it's well acted, well shot, well, the action, storytelling, just amazing. There's not enough that I can say about this movie, but just singing its praises. It is phenomenal. Phenomenal? Uh, Phenomenal. But something that really was like the icing on the cake for me was just how well everyone's storylines kind of came to a close and how they progress as characters. So I'm gonna kind of talk about each one of the characters and kind of give my opinion on how their story has gone. So there's about 7 different characters. Actually, let's say 8. 8 different characters that we get to see grow throughout these movies to what they become from where they started. So I'm gonna go with probably the smallest out of all of them, the smallest character, Kraglin, who I'm putting there as like an honorary member because he was in all 3. Cosmos was in all 3, so was Howard the Duck too. But Cosmo, we don't really get enough about her, especially in the first one, for there to be a story arc. So I'm just not gonna talk about it. But Kraglin was in the first one as his sidekick to Yondu. He was in the second one, still kind of as a side character, but definitely getting a lot more growth. In the third movie, he definitely shines. He's a lot more compatible. He's not just a goofus most of the time. Sometimes he still is, but he was a very fun character to kind of see his story throughout these movies. Like from starting out just being the sidekick of some dude to now taking up the guy's taking up Yondu's arrow and being able to control it with precision. It's just amazing. Um, then I gotta talk about Mantis, who is like the newer one. She wasn't in the first movie, she was in the second. Now she's here. I kind of like Mantis. In the second movie, she was okay, but in the holiday special and in this movie, she does. She gets like a major character upgrade. Like she's trying to prove herself as she's not just like this dumb idiot who's on the Guardians. Like she's actually pretty like capable. She can hold her own in a fight. She uses her powers in fight scenes very well. And you kind of get this whole story arc of her being like, I've always served other people, now I'm gonna go and find out what else there is for me. And I'm interested to see what they do with that. I don't think it's really gonna go anywhere. I think it's just like writing her off, being like, oh, she's just doing this. But at the end of the day, I still think it's a good conclusion to lead her off with. Then we got Nebula, the secondary villain in the first movie, an anti-hero in the second one, and then a hero, basically. And I think Nebula might be one of my favorite MCU characters, just in terms of character growth. Because in the first one, she just wants to get Gamora. In the second one, she just wants to get Gamora, but learns that it's a futile effort and she should just move on. And then with Infinity War and Endgame, we kind of see this. It is kind of a jump, but I would say it's more of a hop, not a jump. You can kind of see her getting to the place where she is now, at least in the beginning of Guardians Volume 3. But she very much comes into her own instead of just being Thanos' second in command. With Infinity War and Endgame, you kind of see her becoming her own person. When she's in trouble, she tries to get the Guardians to come help her, showing that she is not, afraid of asking for their help. even though the situation was probably like insanely dire. But in Endgame, we see her and she's like working with the Avengers. She is on the planetary call, like the little conference that they have at Avengers HQ with Black Widow. But she really shows that she has evolved as a team player, even if it was out of necessity because of like Infinity War and Endgame. But I think with this third one, she really has shown like how much she has been able to almost kind of fill the hole that Gamora left in the Guardians. Even though then she is still a bit rough, and especially in this movie, you get to see her kind of warm up to them and have to come to terms with how she feels about herself. And it's very interesting to see. I really enjoyed her character growth throughout the entire of the MCU. And then we got Groot. There's not much to say about Groot. He doesn't really have a character arc. He's just kind of there to say, I'm Groot. And that's about it. I do kind of like the whole theme of the entire MCU, which was like in the first movie he dies, and in the second one you kind of get to see his rebirth. And it's carried over through Infinity War, Endgame, and in this one, which he doesn't really do that much, but he does have one of the coolest scenes, in my opinion. I don't want to go into spoilers. I'm not going to cover spoilers. I'll probably do like a spoiler review, but I'm going to try to just like make it very vague in what I'm trying to talk about. A lot of this movie it very much covers Rocket. And when we're first introduced to Rocket, he's with Groot. They're Rocket Raccoon and Groot. And, that's a pretty iconic pairing from the comics to the movies, but we don't really see anything with that development, even though a lot of this is about Rocket. We see where he comes from, and we see how he's become this person we know now. At least from like the beginning of Guardians 1. But we never see him meet Groot. We never see exactly their relationship that much, which is weird in my opinion, especially with a big plot point in Guardians 1 being Groot's death. Like, that was a big plot point, but it doesn't really feel like they're caring that much about their relationship at this point. It kind of feels as more like Groot has become he's become like, if Groot was Rocket's child in Volume 1, he is everyone's child in Volume 3. Like, everyone cares about him, everyone learns to love him throughout the entire trilogy. But in this one, he doesn't really do that much. But again, one of the coolest scenes. And if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But one of the coolest scenes, and the way that he is at the end of this, it seems pretty cool because it's a lot more accurate to the source material. I believe, well, kind of, but I kind of like how they brought him back to his roots a little bit. Pun not intended. Then we have Rocket Raccoon. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna save Rocket for the end. So I'm going to move on to Drax, played by Batista, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. Drax in this one, he got fixed from Volume 2. Now, my pure opinion on Drax is that in Volume 1, that's what Gunn wanted. He wanted to do that, and Marvel didn't care because Marvel did not care what was going to happen in that movie because it was full of like C-listers. But when they saw that Guardians was a franchise they could milk, they got a lot more involved with Volume 2, and they made Drax a lot more jokey. There's not any sources I can go to back this up. This is just my opinion. But Volume 3 kind of fixes him in a bit. He's still jokey, don't get me wrong, but they kind of go back to what he was, and we still see that in Volume 2, but we go back to that in Volume 3, which is he is this guy who is kind of dumb, will mostly just be there for comedy, but we get a roundabout with his character. He is no longer the destroyer, he's become something else. He's become I won't go into specifics of it because it is kind of spoilery, but he becomes a father, kind of. And it's really nice to see that. He becomes a father of sorts. I don't want to go too into it. Again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers. I'm trying to be vague as possible. But he kind of becomes a father. And it's interesting what that could lead. But again, I feel like with the Mantis stuff, it is just kind of a writing him off. Especially because I'm pretty sure Dave Bautista has said that he doesn't plan on playing Drax unless James Gunn is attached to the project. But I'm going to move on to Gamora. Now, Gamora is probably... It's kind of a shame because in the first two movies, she does play a prominent role, but it is kind of stuck in the whole Mary Sue love interest, where it doesn't feel like she has much to do outside of being right and developing a relationship with Quill. So it's kind of hard for me to really like her as a character and talk about her growth when that really just feels like that's all she's done. And maybe I'm wrong, but she didn't really feel like she had much of a purpose outside of those, in my opinion. In this third one, it's a little interesting because it's something that they keep repeating, at least through the beginning of the movie, is that this is Gamora. This is now just Gamora. She's just out there. The Gamora, the 2014 Gamora who got put into the timeline because of Endgame, she's just now running loose. She has now found a new team. And, I don't know, she doesn't really serve a purpose outside of kind of Star-Lord's story, so it's kind of hard to talk about her as a whole. She doesn't really do much in this movie, and it's kind of... she doesn't really interact with that many people outside of Star-Lord. She might have her moments with Drax and Mantis and Nebula, but they're very short. She's really just there to serve Star-Lord's character. Which, talking about Star-Lord, so he is very much our point of view character throughout Volume 1 and Volume 2, but we kind of see that step back in Volume 3. He's no longer the main character, everyone's the main character, but Rocket's more of the main character. The movie is based around him, kind of, but we get to see more of a focus on the entire team and not just Quill. And it's kind of interesting seeing how this trilogy has gone, because in the first one it was about Quill and his mom. That was kind of the underlying tone. In the second one it was Quill and his father. So just based on those two, you think it would round out with Quill and someone else. And it is kind of, but it's not a big part of the story, unlike the other two. Quill, like I said before, he kind of takes a step back from the spotlight. But we do get to see some resolution with Quill. Again, I don't know how much I can go into that without getting spoilery, but we kind of see him learn the lesson of moving on. And not just moving on, but kind of moving on by stepping back. Realizing he has to go backwards to really move forward, if that makes sense. But let's move on from Quill, and we're going to get into Rocket. Now Rocket, he is at the spotlight for half of this. I feel like he probably shares the same amount of screen time as every other character in the movie, but he's still very much the focus of the movie. The entire movie is about him, in a way. It's all about servicing him. And it's just, I'm gonna be honest, we get to see Rocket's backstory slowly throughout the movie. I freaking bawled. There were times in that backstory of his, I almost shed tears. I had like two come down my eyes, and they were proud because that was great. Those scenes were amazing, and the fact that, I don't know, it's just watching these movies growing up. Like the first Guardians movie that came out, when that came out, I was like 14. I was definitely a preteen, and I remember seeing the first Iron Man in theaters when I was 9. And like, when Endgame came out, I was graduating like a month later. So when I say I grew up with these movies, I grew up with these movies. Probably like a lot of people my age, but like, these were a big part of not just my childhood, but my growth as a person. And they still kind of are, even though I don't watch as many. But just watching like where Rocket and a lot of these characters were in the first movie to now, it makes me tear up. Just because like, just seeing how they developed, especially Rocket. Because you could always kind of tell that there was always something off about him. Like, we never really got into how he became, Rocket. We never really explored that much. This movie opens the gates. It opens the gates of what exactly happened to him, and it is so sad and so heartbreaking. From a guy that, when I originally saw him in the movie, I was just kind of like, oh, he's kind of like a jerk. Like, he's that cocky guy that you always get in like a heist movie or something, where he's just like really full of him. Yeah, where he's really full of himself and there's nothing else to it. But like, when you see where he is now, like where you see how he got there, it makes so much sense looking back. And especially like where he ends up. It's like it will make you feel sad but also happy that he was able to live the life that he always dreamed of, but in a different way. And yeah, I freaking bawled. Rocket, even though he doesn't really share that many interactions with the cast throughout the movie, has some probably the most powerful scenes in the movie. And like, God, so many great scenes with him. It was really his movie, and I gotta give props to Bradley Cooper specifically, because he really made you feel for Rocket. Again, I can't talk about how great Rocket's story is without getting too specific, so I'm trying to leave it off very vague. But like, all I'm gonna say is that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is an amazing movie. It really is. The villain is amazing. He's threatening while being like, he's a villain you would want to explore more with, and who knows, maybe we will. But all in all, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is an amazing movie, top to bottom. The character growth you get to see throughout this, not only this movie alone, but throughout the entire trilogy, even movies and projects outside of the trilogy, just seeing where those characters started to where they ended up with, it's so good, so satisfying, and you can really tell this was James Gunn's love letter to the Guardians before he goes off and makes a bunch of, hopefully, good DC movies. A lot of people have said this, and a lot of people have tried to undermine this statement, but watching Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 makes me very hopeful for not only these characters in the future, but also James Gunn and his projects moving forward, especially those concerning superhero movies. Because if he can capture this much emotion and this much. If he can really capture this much emotion and just pure amazement from like people like me watching this movie, he will kill it as Superman. He will kill being the director as Superman. Because especially with interviews that I've heard of him, you can really tell that he really loves the character and wants to do it right. Like he wants to make him human, which to me is the best thing that you could do for Superman. Make him human. And if you don't believe he can do that, I would highly recommend you watch this movie, because every single one of these characters, whether it's a green alien, a woman with the antenna on her head, or a talking raccoon, they all feel human. They just all feel like people you would. They all feel like people you wouldn't know. People with tragic backstories who don't truly know who they are and have to come into their own to find out who they are as people. Again, it's a rough thing to try to explain, and I don't want to get into specifics without giving spoilers. But again, it's amazing. I loved it. That's all I can say. So that's probably going to be my review for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Again, go check out the movie. I'll probably do a spoiler review maybe a week after this. But anyways, I'll see you guys next time.